What is going on, Fight Feeders? Welcome back to Fight Feed. We've got UFC 326, Holloway versus Oliveira 2 coming up on March 7th. And this video is going to be my full card predictions and picks for who I believe will win each fight on this card. Now, UFC 326, if you didn't already know with the main event, this is going to be an absolute slugfest of a card. I think it's going to be a super fun one. You got Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira. These guys are so fucking good, and they have the best fighting styles, the most entertaining fighting styles, in my opinion. So much so that I actually dropped a 40-minute video talking about that fight, particularly on my channel. You guys can go check that out if you haven't already. But outside of that, we've got the return of not one Crimson Chin, but both Crimson Chins from the UFC. We got Chad Dober himself, and then, of course, Raul Rosas Jr., who's got the chin of a generation, okay? So these two are coming in here. You got one that's kind of an unk now. The other one's still a young prospect. We're going through the entire card, guys, so make sure you drop a like, give the video a hype, subscribe to Fight Feed. Let's dive in to the first fight of the night. Fight number one on the card is a featherweight bout, 145-pound division. Now, I want to say, as you go through this fight card here, right, I have my setup of this fight card kind of built off of the UFCstats.com, because UFCstats.com actually has a very, if you ever go on UFCstats.com, just like the UFC website, they take a very long time to update, right? So right now, a couple matchups there for UFC 326 are not even happening. But if you keep up with it, it is very accurate in terms of the bout order. Now, Tapology is probably the best, right? Because Tapology does have the bout order pretty down pat, and then also has a very good ability to stay up to date when fighters fall out. So the way I have this ordered is kind of built off both those things, but I'm going to have timestamps, so make sure to check that out if you're need to jump around at all. This is a featherweight bout, as I mentioned. We got Gaston Bolanos versus Jeong Lee. So Gaston Bolanos, 33, 5'7", with a 69-inch reach. He's 8-5 as a pro, 2-2 in the UFC. 6 wins by knockout, 22% KO rate. 0 wins by submission, and his other wins are 2 wins by decision, which is 25% of his wins overall there. And finally, he has a 75% finishing rate overall. 1 loss by KO. For Gaston Bolanos, 3 losses by submission, which is 60% of his losses, and then 1 loss by decision, the remaining 20% of his losses. Last 4 fights for Gaston Bolanos, he is 2-2. A decision win over Aaron Phillips, a KO in round 2, loss to Marcus McGee, a win over Cortavius Romeus by way of decision, and then a loss by way of submission in round 2 to Quang Lee. Yeong Lee is going to be 30 years old, 5'10", with a 73.5-inch reach, so he's going to have a significant height and reach advantage. He's 11-3 as a pro, 2-2 in the UFC, 4 wins by way of knockout, a 15% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 27% submission rate, and then 4 wins by way of decision, a 36% decision rate, giving Yeong Lee a 64% finishing rate overall. Lee has 1 loss by KO, 33% of his losses, 2 losses by decision, the remaining 67% of his losses. He is also 2-2 in his last 4, currently on a 2-fight skid, a loss to Daniel Santos by way of decision. Not a horrible loss. Daniel Santos proven to be a very good fighter. A loss to Hyder Emil by way of KO in round 1. Prior to that, a win over Blake Builder by way of decision, and then prior to that, a win over Yija, a decision win, a split decision win at that. So this matchup, guys, Gaston Bolanos is a fighter who's always going to have that powerful one-shot power aspect to his game. He has the potential to go out here and catch Yeong Lee with a big shot, maybe put him out cold. But in my opinion, guys, the issue I have going the way of Gaston Bolanos in this fight is that he is not only going to be, you know, the older fighter here, which is not a significant disadvantage. He's only 3 years older. They're both going to be in their prime. But Gaston Bolanos, 5'7", with a 69-inch reach, he's a guy who is normally a fighter at bantamweight, going up into the featherweight division, fighting a true featherweight, a guy younger, who's longer, with a longer reach. I think the way this fight's going to go, guys, is that Yeong Lee is going to keep Gaston Bolanos at range with his longer reach and just long kickboxing and boxing style. Probably just land the jab and keep Gaston Bolanos at range. The way that Gaston Bolanos wins this fight, guys, is by actually landing a big shot and hurting Yeong Lee and maybe finishing him by KO. It's hard for me to see Gaston Bolanos winning this by way of decision. because I just don't see him having an easy time closing the distance. And then when you match up the fact that Jeong Lee, not only the longer striker here, he's got the better ground game, and he's going to be able to mix in that ground game, and that is going to give Gaston Bolanos problems as well. And that is why it's going to be really hard for me to side with Gaston Bolanos winning this fight. So I've ultimately chosen Jeong Lee by way of decision, but Jeong Lee has that ability to mix in the grappling and submissions, and that is a way or an opportunity to success for him to get a finish over Gaston Bolanos, a guy who's only either been finished by way of submission a majority of his career, or then decision and KO. But the blueprint is there to find a finish over Gaston Bolanos, and it's clearly in the grappling department. So I got to side with Jeong Lee, but I think he gets a decision. I think he mixes up the striking and then also mixes up the takedowns if he needs to, especially if he gets tagged or hurt. And I just see him winning by way of decision unanimously over Gaston Bolanos. All right, guys, fight number 2. We've got a middleweight bout, and the lamb might be coming out to slaughter here. We got Donte Johnson, one of my up-and-coming favorites from Contender Series. This dude's a fucking beast, okay? Going up against the great Cody Brundage, the guy who, you know, you got to, at the very least, guys, you got to give Cody Brundage credit. I'm sorry his last 4 fights aren't updated. We know he did get starched out pretty badly against Cam Ralston not too long ago here. But he comes in on short notice and he takes these opportunities, and that is one thing I respect so much from Cody Brundage. So shout out to Cody there. Donte Johnson's 26 years old, 5'8", with a 74-inch reach, 7-0 as a pro, 1-0 in the UFC, recently submitted Boot Gang in round 2. 6 wins by KO, an 86% KO rate, 1 win by submission, a 14% submission rate. That little submission aspect he picked up in his last one. No losses on the professional career of Donte Johnson. Last 4 fights for this guy, what does he have? He has nothing but wins and finishes in either the first or second round. KO round 1 over Ryan Parker. KO round 1 over James Ford. KO round 1 over Darian Abbey. I like to call him Downton Abbey because of that fucking show. And then Cedric Dumas, which is Mr. Boot Gang, a sub in round 2. Donte Johnson, guys, he's got a grit and style you just love to see. Now, interesting enough, he's a short and stout guy for the middleweight division, but he is just, you know, even fighting Darian Abbey, a guy who was listed at 6'6", but then come fight night, he's 6'2", you know, big disparity there, right? Like, it's kind of crazy. I could argue I'm 6'8", but I'm 6'4". And yeah, it's like, that's a huge disparity if you come fight night anyway. Regardless, that was a heavyweight bout, I'm pretty sure, and he knocked out Darian Abbey. So very bad look when we look at the stylistic matchup here, because Cody Brundage, you know, 31 years old, 6 foot tall, 72-inch reach. He's 11-7 as a pro, 5-6 in the UFC. He's got 6 wins by KO, 55% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 27% submission rate, and 1 win by decision, a 9% decision rate, giving Cody Brundage an 82% finishing rate overall. But he's got 2 losses by KO, which is actually 3 if you know, it's clear that this didn't get updated. My bad, guys. 2 losses, but 3 losses by KO, which is going to be more than 29% there. So to give you guys the rundown for real, and I apologize this was not updated, but Cody Brundage is a 38% KO loss rate here. 25% of his losses by submission, and then 38% of his losses by way of decision. Last 4 fights for Cody, a loss to Cam Ralston by way of KO, and then before that, a split decision loss to Eric McConaughey. Before that, a no contest, which he got KO'd in. And prior to that, a KO win over Julian Marquez, where he almost got KO'd there as well. Guys, Cody Brundage is a scrappy guy on the feet. We saw him hurt Cam Ralston, almost becoming a huge underdog win in the hometown of Cam Ralston. Yet, what ends up happening, guys? Cam Ralston stays the course and he finds the KO win over Cody Brundage. Guys, I can't look past that. I think in this fight, it's a little bit of like a lamb at the slaughter, a short notice fight. A guy in Cody Brundage just got KO not too long ago. Donte Johnson's going to put the paws on him and he's going to KO him. It's probably going to happen in round 1 or round 2. I've locked in with round 2 because I think Cody Brundage, guys, he is slept on for his ability to make things a bit of a war and scrappy on the feet. But yeah, I fancy Donte Johnson here getting the KO in either round 1 or round 2. We're going to say round 2 for the sake of saying it, and that is my pick. All right, guys, fight number 3, the featherweight division. We've got Alberto Montes versus Ricky Turcios. This is an interesting fight because Ricky Turcios was just recently booked. He's a bantamweight fighter most of the time. Recently booked against Cameron Smotherman on the opening card of the year, but Smotherman, you know, we saw he passed out and the fight got canceled. So Turcios moving up to featherweight for this one. Montes is 31 years old, 5'7" with a 69-inch reach. He's 10-1 as a pro, 0-0 in the UFC. This is his UFC debut. He's 1 win by knockout, a 4% knockout rate, a 6 wins by submission, a 60% submission rate, and then 3 wins by decision, a 30% decision rate, giving Mr. Montes 70% finishing rate overall. He's got 1 loss by KO, which is 100% of his losses. When we look at his last 4 fights, he lost by KO in round 2 to Ira Lukowski. Not sure who that is, but since then, he's put back-to-back wins over Adam Ortiz with a sub in round 1, Kevin Garcia sub in round 2, Carlos Calderon sub in round 2. Now, his opponent, Ricky Turcios, 32 years old, 5'9", 71-inch reach. He's 12-5 as a pro, 2-3 in the UFCs. 3 wins by knockout, a 25% KO rate, 1 win by submission, an 8% submission rate, then 8 wins by decision, a 67% decision rate, giving Ricky Turcios a little bit of a lackluster finishing rate of 33%. Now, Ricky Turcios got 1 loss by KO, which is 20% of his losses. Another loss by way of submission, another 20% of his losses. And 3 losses by decision, 60% of his losses. In his last 4, he's the opposite of his adversary. He is 1-3 rather than 3-1. A loss to Ayman Zahabi, which is a very solid, guy to have on your resume regardless because he's very talented. A win over Kevin Natividad by way of decision, but a split decision that was. Then a loss to the surging Raul Rosas Jr. by way of submission. And then a loss to Bernardo Sopage by way of decision, guys. Look, Ricky Turcios, the name of the game for Ricky Turcios, he thrives in the chaos. He loves to make it a chaotic fight. Not a guy who is a master of anything. In my opinion, he's more so a master of the fighting art of chaos, right? He is a guy that makes it ugly. He's got an awkward striking style and a relentless pace and ability to make things dirty in the grappling, right? Get a grappling exchange. It's very, not sloppy, but just dirty, right? Like he just finds ways to make everything chaotic, and that is where he thrives. Now, my issue with this is when you look at his inability to stop submissions, especially from guys who are more of a technical master. And I think that in this case, you have Alberto Montes is a technical master when it comes to his submission arts and his submission game. And I think that that is where Ricky Turcios tends to fade or lose fights when he goes up against guys who are much technically more sound in a certain area. And in this matchup, that is kind of where I see things going. I see Ricky Turcios attempting to bring out that chaotic style, and essentially Alberto Montes just being the submission ace that he is, finding a way to neutralize the game of Turcios, because although Turcios is going to be taller, longer reach, he has fought historically at bantamweight, whereas Montes is a true featherweight here. He is going to be more used to and probably have just the stronger frame by that aspect because he's used to fighting at this weight class. I just see Montes being able to find those moments where he's able to get Ricky Turcios into a bad position and then overpower him with that grappling strength and get a sub in round 2. But could be wrong. Turcios is a scrappy fighter. He has every opportunity to potentially make this a dirty fight. Now, one thing that worries me about Montes, guys, although very good, he has not fought in almost 2 years. His last fight was on Contender Series in 2024. I am not very well aware of what has kept him out of the game. I think he's had a couple canceled fights. Turcios, though, also not a very active guy. I mean, when we actually compare their activity rate, Montes fought the end of 2024, whereas Turcios fought at the very beginning of 2025, and he hasn't fought since. So both guys are actually almost in the same boat when it comes to activity rate here. So I'm not necessarily super worried about that, but even then, Montes is still the younger guy by a year. Yeah. It's hard for me to lock in with Turcios on this one, guys, because I think, he's going up a weight class, and I think he's going to have a hard time dealing with that very strong grappling ability of Alberto Montes. And I think that Alberto Montes is going to be able to use the weaknesses in the grappling that Turcios has. Although Turcios is a scrappy grappler, he's going to find Turcios he probably use his front headlock position that he likes and find a way to get the submission. And that is why I'm going Alberto Montes submission round 2. All right, guys, fight number 4. It's a light heavyweight bout in the 205-pound division. Rodolfo Bellato versus Luke Fernandez. Rodolfo Bellato, 30 years old. He's a 96 baby. Shout out to Rodolfo. Just turned 30 in the month of February. 6'3" with a 77.5-inch reach. He's 12-3 as a pro, 1-1 in the UFC. Now, if I actually included in the record here, guys, the draws and no contests, we would be 1-1-2 in the UFC for Mr. Rodolfo. Now, Rodolfo, like I said, this guy has a couple wins on his record, right? He's got 7 wins by way of KO, which 26% KO rate, 4 wins by submission, 33% submission rate, and then 1 win by decision, and 8% decision rate, a 92% finishing rate. And then, I would love to know the numbers on it going to draw or no contest, because he's got, what is that, 2 out of the 12 or 2 out of the 15 fights have ended that way for him. When we look at his losses, he's only lost by way of KO or decision. So 2 losses by KO, which is 67% of his losses, then 1 loss by decision. The remaining 33% of his losses. And last 4 fights for him. Rodolfo, guys, he's got some sick tattoos, okay? He got a big KO win over Ihor Potieria, but then he has a draw to Jimmy Crute, which was kind of a back-and-forth war, if you really think about it. They were just going back and forth in that one. And, ends up in a draw. But then a no contest to Paul Craig where, a lot of people, myself included, feel he totally was faking being KO'd. Like, it was very theatrical, all right? That's the only word I can use for it. And finally, then a loss to Navajo Sterling, which is a decision loss where, honestly, neither guy looked impressive in that one. Navajo Sterling's always a good fighter, but like that one did not look too impressive for him in the manner in which he got it done, which was just by decision. Now, Rodolfo is going to be welcoming a UFC newcomer, a 2025 Contender Series winner, Luke Fernandez, who's 30 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. Luke Fernandez, much less professional experience. He's got 6 fights overall, which is 6 wins, 6-0. 0-0 in the UFC because this is his debut in the UFC. 5 wins by knockout, which is, guys, disregard these percentages. This is way off. I don't know what the hell is pulling in there, but Luke Fernandez has 5 wins by way of KO, 1 win by way of decision. So an 83% finishing rate overall, which means he has 83% of his wins by KO. I apologize. I don't know why the KO percentage is so off there. It should be 83%. He has 0 losses in his professional career. His last 4 fights, 4-0, right? He's got a KO over Peter New. Don't know who that is. KO over Greg Ellis. Don't know who that is. Decision over Christian Edwards. Don't know who that is. And then finally a win over Rafael Pergentino in KO in round 1, which happened very early on in that Contender Series bout. So Luke Fernandez has been a straight killer on the feet, it seems. And guys, Rodolfo Bellato, like the way I was breaking this fight down, I'm like, this seems like a weird fight where, because of the lack of experience Luke Fernandez has, but also he's a little bit smaller for this division at 6'1", there's a chance Rodolfo Bellato could actually put some hands on Luke Fernandez and have this fight go his way. Like, there is a chance, but my problem is that Rodolfo Bellato just has not been able to put things together in his time in the UFC, guys. Like, a lot of fights so far, but only able to get 1 win and then 1 loss. Like, everything else is either a no contest or draw. And I think you can't discount the fact that Luke Fernandez, although hasn't fought in the UFC yet, he has been more consistently getting finishes and specifically finishes by way of KO in his fights. And I think that it's hard to look past that here. I could see Rodolfo maybe being an underdog probably, and the nod going his way because he's had that UFC grit and experience. He's also going to have the size advantage. But I actually think you can't look past Luke Fernandez just having that ability to find ways to get things done on the feet. And I feel like in this matchup, he is primed to catch Rodolfo Bellato in a wild exchange, because Rodolfo does that. He comes out, he's wild, but he's strong. And I could see him maybe tagging up Luke a little bit, but then Luke finding a big counter shot and dropping Rodolfo and then getting the win by way of KO. So that is actually the route that I'm going in this one. I think Luke Fernandez gets it done, KO round 2, but like I said, could be dead wrong on this one. It's a tough one to pick because you never know. Rodolfo Bellato might actually go out there, say there's levels to this game, and just, land something big on Luke Fernandez. All right, guys, fight number 5 on the card. We got a flyweight bout, Sumudaerji versus Jesus Aguilar. Sumudaerji's 30. He's 5'8", 72-inch reach. He's 18-7 as a pro, 5-4 in the UFC. 13 wins by way of knockout, a 48% KO rate. 1 win by way of submission, a 6% submission rate, and 4 wins by way of decision, a 22% decision rate, giving Mr. Sumudaerji a 78% finishing rate overall. Sumudaerji's only lost by way of submission or decision. He's got 6 losses by submission and 86% submission loss rate, and 1 loss by way of decision, a 14% decision loss rate. In his last 4, we've seen Sumudaerji go 2-2. Of course, lost to Tim Elliott by way of submission, a loss to Charles Johnson, the energy himself, then a win over Mitch Raposo by way of split decision, and a win over Kevin Borjas by way of decision. I gotta say, guys, I have not often picked Sumudaerji to win. I think I picked him against Mitch Raposo, but Sumudaerji, in my opinion, guys, has I don't know. I just feel like I leave watching a lot of his fights not super impressed, and it just feeling like the engine that could, but he just doesn't type of thing. I don't know. But Jesus Aguilar is one of my favorites. I think he's a great fighter. He's 29 years old, 5'4", with a 62.5-inch reach. He's 12-3 as a pro, 4-2 in the UFC, 1 win by way of knockout, an 8% KO rate. It's interesting because Jesus Aguilar landed such a devastating KO in that 1 KO he has that it has lent people to believe that he is, or not led people to believe that he is this KO artist, but the stats really don't say that, right? Now, his submission game is much stronger, though, with 7 wins by submission. That's 58% of his wins by submission. 4 wins by decision, that other 33% of his wins. And then finally, a 67% finishing rate overall. Jesus Aguilar has 2 losses by way of submission, which is 67% of his losses. 1 loss by decision, the remaining 33% of his losses. In his last 4 fights, he is 3-1, so just a little bit more success there on his front. In my opinion, guys, while I am not super impressed by Sumudaerji at times, this one is one of those fights where it's like, I see it going the way of Jesus Aguilar getting a submission in round 2. Why do I see that? I think Jesus Aguilar, while he's going to have a significant height and reach disadvantage, as you can see, almost a 10-inch reach disadvantage, Jesus Aguilar has had a good approach with dealing with opponents who have a longer reach. He's just always the smaller guy with shorter reach, and he finds a way around that in his fights. And I think he's got a solid all-around mixed bag of skills when it comes to the MMA game. And I could see him utilizing those big shots that he can throw, maybe landing a big shot on Sumudaerji. God damn, as I think about this, guys, I feel like there's a chance that Sumudaerji could just style on Jesus Aguilar at the same time. I feel like he could keep Jesus Aguilar at range and just land, shots at range. And then, Sumudaerji's done a decent job at stuffing takedowns. Like Mitch Raposo had a very tough time getting him getting any success in the grappling front. This is tough. Because I think that when you look at Jesus Aguilar, he has that ability to, I think, get takedowns when his opponents, even if they have good takedown defense, it's hard for his opponents to stop it. Oh, fuck, man, this is a tough one. I know I picked Jesus Aguilar. We're going to stay with Jesus for now. I see Jesus getting it done by way of submission. I think if Jesus gets things to the ground, or he gets things against the cage, he might be able to get a nice back take off Sumudaerji and go from there. But Sumudaerji has trained significantly now with the Uriah Faber camp, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's not going to be a slouch in the ground game. So I think that there's a high chance, actually, that Sumudaerji keeps him at bay with a very long reach, being able to just kind of pepper at range and win by decision that way. But I'm going to stay with the course here for now. Jesus Aguilar finds a way to close the distance, finds a way to get things to the floor, and get Sumudaerji in a submission. And that is what we're going to lock in with, guys. But like I said, it could very well go the other way. All right, guys, fight number 6 is a light heavyweight bout, 205-pound division. We've got Diyar Nurgozhay versus Rafael Tobias. Nurgozhay is 28 years old, 6'2", with a 74-inch. He is 10-2 as a pro, 0-2 in the UFC. This guy was undefeated and a strong prospect, and he's now suffered back-to-back losses, both by way of submission. Now, Nurgozhay still powerful, right? He's got 5 wins by way of KO, 19% KO rate. He's got 2 wins by submission, a 20% submission rate, and then 2 wins by decision, a 20% decision rate, which is not mathing. I don't know why that is not mathing up here, guys, because technically speaking, he has 10 wins, so that should be not 9. But regardless, 70% finishing rate overall. He has 2 losses by way of submission. That's 100% of his losses. Guys, this matchup, it's a tough one, right? Because, Nurgozhay has been a guy that was, somewhat touted to be maybe a force to be reckoned with in this division. Now, going up against his opponent here, Rafael Tobias, 22 years old, 6'2", with a 74.5-inch reach. Both these guys are identical in their height, and then just a small, very small 0.5-inch advantage on the side of Tobias. Tobias 14-1 as a pro, 0-0 in the UFC. Got a big win on Contender Series, so he's debuting in this fight here, which is added pressure for him in this matchup. He's got 5 wins by way of knockout, a 36% KO rate. He's got 6 wins by way of submission, a 43% submission rate, and then 3 wins by way of decision, a 21% decision rate, giving Tobias a 79% finishing rate overall. The only loss in Tobias's career came by way of KO, so it's 100% of his losses, but, you know, in his last 4, he's 4-0, big wins. You know, he's got a decision win over Paiva, Willie Anderson Paiva, don't know who that is, and then a KO in round 1 and a KO in round 2, respectively. And finally, on the Contender Series, gets a big win in, which is a sub in round 1 over Yair de Oliveira. Guys, I think Nurgozhay is a good fighter, but what he has shown, especially in that loss to Brenson Hero, and then, of course, my boy, Uran Saltiziev, one of my favorites, he just has shown a very lackluster ability to be defensively sound in the grappling exchanges, especially when it goes into a submission effort from his opponent. And it is too hard to look past Rafael Tobias's absolute smothering style and ability on the ground and think that Nurgozhay is going to have any other outcome than be submitted, in my opinion. Now, anything can happen in MMA. I'm showing that I have a lot of confidence in Tobias, but you have to consider he's still a young guy. He's going to have less UFC experience, although not a ton of less UFC experience, as Nurgozhay's only got 2 fights, but Tobias has an ability on the ground that is going to give Nurgozhay issues should they go there, and that is exactly where Rafael Tobias is going to try to bring things. But not to mention that Tobias is also a very solid striker, right? He's got 5 wins by way of knockout. So my opinion is that Rafael Tobias maybe trades back and forth in the first round with Diyar Nurgozhay, and I think by round 2 he finds a way to get things to the floor, and I think he ends up finding a submission in round 2. So that is my official pick in decision, is that Rafael Tobias gets a finish by way of sub in round 2. All right, guys, fight number 7 on the card. We've got a bantamweight bout, the legendary Cody Garbrandt, no love, versus Long Xiao. Now, this fight, guys, you got Cody Garbrandt. He's 34 years old, 5'8", 65.5-inch reach, a former champion of the UFC. He is 14-7 now as a pro, 9-7 in the UFC. It's shocking, honestly, to see, you know, Cody go from being undefeated to a champion to now having a 50-50 record, and then also almost having a perfect 50-50 record in the UFC with a 9-7 record overall. Cody's got 11 wins by way of knockout, a 79% KO rate, 0 wins by submission, 3 wins by decision, 21% decision win rate, which gives Cody Garbrandt a 79% finishing rate overall. Now, when we look at Cody's losses, he has lost 4 times by way of KO, which is 57% of his losses, 1 loss by submission, 14% of his losses, and then 2 losses by way of decision, 29% of his losses. Last 4 for Cody, he's 2-2. We did, you know, kind of cool, guys. I actually got to see Cody 2 times. Both times I've been to a UFC event, I got to watch him live. He got the KO over Brian Kelleher in person, which is really cool to see. I think that was UFC 296, unless I'm just completely blanking, but I did go to UFC 296. Pretty sure I saw him there. And then I saw him live at Davison Figueiredo fight at UFC 300. And then, of course, you know, his last fight against Raoni Barcelos. Raoni Barcelos has just been this guy who's continuously getting wins in the bantamweight division. But Cody did look good in that fight. It's just Raoni Barcelos was the better man that night. Now, his opponent, Long Xiao, 27 years old, 5'8" with a 70-inch reach. Xiao is 27-10 as a pro. He has a 1-2 record in the UFC. He's 5 wins by way of KO, a 19% KO rate, 9 wins by submission, a 33% submission rate, 13 wins by way of decision, a 48% decision rate, giving Xiaolong a 52% finishing rate overall. Now, all of Long Xiao's losses in his career have come by way of either a KO or a decision. He's got 3 losses by KO, which is 30% of his losses, and then 7 losses by way of decision, the remaining 70% of his losses. Taking a look at the last 4 fights for Long Xiao, he had a majority decision win over Kamikubo, and then a split decision loss to Cheng Ho Lee, and then a big KO win over Quang Lee, where he got the KO in round 3, and then most previously in his last fight, a loss to Su Yang Yu by way of decision. Now, guys, this fight is interesting And the reason I say it's interesting is that Cody Garbrandt, he's going to be like a Michael Johnson in the bantamweight division. Even though Cody's 34, he's still young. I think that Cody's always going to have a level of speed in the hands that is just unmatched when he's going up against other fighters. I think the problem I have with this matchup for Cody is that although Cody, I think, is actually going to be the better striker here, he's going to have the more dangerous striking, the faster striking, the potential to knock out Long Xiao, probably more so than Long Xiao has on his end. The issue that I have with Cody, though, is his ability or inability, if you will, to stop, a strong grappling heavy approach. And I think that in this matchup, what we're going to see is Long Xiao have the ability to mix in the grappling a lot more so and potentially get Cody in positions where he is able to find a submission. But I think the other issue here, although I think Cody's going to be the better striker, Long Xiao is just going to have a longer striking range than Cody will. And I think that is something Cody's always dealing with in fights, especially in this division in the modern day. He is a shorter reach compared to that a lot of his opponents, right? In this matchup, it's a 4.5 reach disparity on Cody's end. So he's going to have to make up for that reach disadvantage by blitzing in. And I think if Long Xiao can remain on the outside, utilize that reach advantage, and just land those straight shots from range, he is likely to just be the more active, more volume-focused fighter, because he's going to be able to stop Cody in his tracks as Cody tries to blitz in. Now, like I said, though, Cody being as fast as he is, as powerful as he is, I can see Cody easily stealing around, maybe even getting a knockdown or maybe even getting a KO. But right now, if we're looking at recent history, it's hard for me to lock in with Cody getting a finish over Long Xiao, especially because Long Xiao's been in there with some good guys. He's either finished them or he's won by way of a decision. And then when he's lost recently, it's really only been by way of those decision losses. And specifically, even the Chang Ho Lee fight, you could argue maybe could have gone the other way here. And like I said, in this matchup, I think that Long Xiao is just going to be able to stay at range, landing those shots at range, probably in a more efficient manner than Cody. But Long Xiao also, if you look at his UFC stats, he doesn't have anything that would signify him going for submissions. But if you look at his record overall, he has a lot of wins by way of submission. And so that is another factor here that you have to take into account. Not only is he the more youthful fighter, the longer fighter, he's also got that potential to mix in the grappling, which is something we've just seen Cody have struggles with, especially up against guys like Davison, who I think would probably be much better in that case than a Long Xiao Long. But guys, right now, it's just, I love Cody Garbrandt. Will I be rooting for Cody? Absolutely. But who do I think is going to win? I think it's going to be Xiao Long by way of decision. That's my pick. All right, guys, fight number 8. We got Cody Durden versus Nyamjargal Tumendemberel. I don't know how to say his full name, but yeah, this guy is 27, but he looks like he's fucking ancient, okay? Cody Durden's 34, 5'7", 67-inch reach. He's 17-8 as a pro, 6-7 in the UFC. Durden's 6 wins by way of KO, 35% KO rate, 6 wins by submission, 35% submission rate, and 5 wins by decision, a 29% decision rate, giving Mr. Durden a 71% finishing rate overall. He's got 2 losses by KO, which is 25% of his losses, 5 losses by submission, 63% of his losses, and then 2 losses by decision, a 25% decision loss rate. Durden is 1-3 in his last 4. Got a big win over Matt Schnell, sub in round 2, but then he lost to Joshua Van, and then a loss to Jose Ochoa, the surging prospect, KO in round 2, and then a loss to Alan Nascimento in round 2 as well by way of submission. A fight where he was actually tagging up Alan Nascimento, took that one on short notice. Now, his opponent is a younger up-and-coming prospect, 27 years old, 5'7", with a 71-inch reach, 9-1 as a pro, 1-1 in the UFC. He's got 2 wins by KO, a 7% KO rate, but 6 wins by submission, a 67% submission rate, and 1 win by way of decision, an 11% decision rate, giving Mr. Tumendemberel a 89% finishing rate overall, which is very, very, very high for this weight class. The only loss in Tumendemberel's career came by way of decision, so he's got 100% of his losses there. His last 4, he's 3-1, and now his only loss by way of decision was a split decision loss. Now, guys, this fight, I love Cody Durden. I think he's a fun fighter. I think he always brings it. I just cannot get past, although he's going to have the significant experience, he's gone up against the way better competition. I cannot get past the fact that Cody Durden, guys, if he is unable to finish his opponent early on, he is always susceptible to the submission threats of guys who have a good submission game. And in this matchup, it is tailor-made for Tumendemberel to basically weather any storms with Cody Durden and then find him and get him in some sort of submission. And so I cannot look past that. Even if you look at the stats, that is just the way that Cody Durden tends to lose, is by way of a submission. And I think that going up against a guy who is this skilled with his submission threats and going to have the longer reach. So from a striking perspective, I think Cody Durden might actually have underrated hands in this matchup, but I think Tumendemberel is going to be able to keep him at bay, but then also sneak in those offensive grappling situations. And I think he'll be able to find Cody Durden in some sort of submission. I think it'll be scrappy, though. I think these guys will go back and forth a bit. And I see Tumendemberel just finding that submission in round 2 and then getting it done by way of sub in round 2. So that is my official pick for this matchup. All right, guys, we got fight number 9 in the lightweight division. And this is a tale of two unks here, right? We've got Michael Johnson, who's definitely graduated to unk status at this point, and Drew Dober, who's now 37. He's getting up there, right? So this one, you got Michael Johnson, 39 years old, 5'10", 73.5-inch reach. He is 24-19 as a pro, 16-15 in the UFC. 10 wins by way of knockout, a 42% KO rate, 2 wins by way of submission, an 8% submission rate, and 12 wins by way of decision, a 50% decision rate, giving Michael Johnson a 50% finishing rate overall. He's got 3 losses by way of knockout, a 16% KO loss rate, 9 losses by way of submission, a 47% submission loss rate, and then 7 losses by way of decision, a 37% decision loss rate. In his last 4 fights, Michael Johnson's 3-1. Of course, he had a stellar performance against Diego Ferreira until he ate a big overhand right that sent him to the canvas. After that, though, he bounces back with a 3-fight win streak, a big win over Darius Flowers, a KO win over Ottoman Izatar, and then a big upset and decision victory over the young up-and-coming prospect Daniel Zellhuber. Now, Michael Johnson, guys, 10 years older than me. It's like 10 years and 2 days older than I am. We're both, as I enter my 3rd decade, he'll be entering his 4th this June. So shout out to Michael Johnson there, Gemini King. But he's taking on Drew Dober. And Drew Dober is a Chad, if I've ever seen one. He's 37 years old, 5'8", with a 70-inch reach, 28-15, 14-11 as a pro, 28-15 as a pro, 14-11 in UFC, 12 wins by way of knockout, a 43% KO rate, 9 wins by way of submission, a 32% submission rate, and then 7 wins by way of decision, a 25% decision rate, giving Drew Dober a 75% finishing rate overall, which is beautiful in the lightweight division. Now, Drew Dober, he has lost 4 times by way of knockout and 4 times by way of submission, so 27% in each of those categories, and the remaining 47% of his losses, or the remaining 7 of his losses, have come by way of decision. Drew Dober's last 4 fights, it's a big flip from Michael Johnson. He is 1-3 in his last 4. Now, his last one against Kyle Prepolek, he was on his way to losing on the scorecards, but he, like Drew Dober does, finds a big shot to put Mr. Prepolek out and gets the knockout victory. You'll love to see that. Now, a few ways this fight can go, guys, is Drew Dober, because he has that power in his hands and he is a forward type of fighter. He does not try to take steps back. He tries to walk guys down and, get them against the cage and then find those big combinations, especially with his hooks. A very, very solid boxer in that regard. He'll eat punches to give you back one. And there's a big chance here, Drew Dober, as this fight goes on, I think he is always going to be the more dangerous threat here because of that power that he has in his hands. Michael Johnson, though, is going to win this fight when it comes to just blitzing in and out, overall hand speed combination. Michael Johnson at 39 is still probably one of the fastest punching lightweights on the roster, and he's a pretty tall lightweight as well. I think Michael Johnson is going to win this fight by way of using that speed and volume, and likely to win by way of decision. But like I said, Drew Dober, if Michael Johnson's down on his P's and Q's the entire 15 minutes of this fight, he could eat a big shot that puts him out cold, because that is what Drew Dober does best. He walks guys down and waits till he finds that moment and he puts him out cold. We saw it against Bobby Green, right? He was eating a shit ton of damage from Bobby Green, and then he knocks him out cold. Eating a shit ton of damage from Terrence McKinney, then he knocks him out cold. Kyle Prepelec, same thing, eating a lot more damage than we've probably seen Drew eat in other fights, knocks him out cold. So Drew Dober, especially if you believe in the whole theory of him being racially motivated, of course we know he's not, because Drew Dober is one of the nicest dudes in the world. Would love to meet him someday. One of my favorites, probably in my top 10 fighters. Even though he doesn't have the best record, he is just absolute fireworks whenever he gets in the octagon. But Drew Dober, if you believe in the racially motivated thing, this is then prime for him to get a big victory here. But I don't think that is the case. I think that he does have that threat of knocking out Michael Johnson from pillar to post. But I think Michael Johnson is going to be aware of that in this matchup. He's going to utilize that footwork. He's going to land with very fast combinations and get out of harm's way. And so I see Michael Johnson winning this one by decision. I may end up changing my pick. We'll see what happens. But right now, I'm locking in with Michael Johnson by way of decision. All right, guys, fight number 10 in the middleweight division is going to be an absolute banger. We've got Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez versus Bruno the Hulk Ferreira. This is a Brazilian delight. These guys are two fighters that I love watching. I've been a big fan of both guys ever since they've joined the UFC. So gonna be a fun one, guys. We got RoboCop, who's 33 years old, 6'3" with a 75-inch reach. He's 18-6 as a pro, 9-3 in the UFC. He's got 10 wins by knockout, a 56% KO rate, 4 wins by submission, a 22% submission rate, and 4 wins by way of decision, a 22% decision rate, giving RoboCop a 78% finishing rate overall. RoboCop's got 4 losses by way of knockout. That's 67% of his losses. The other 2 losses in his career have come by way of decision, giving him the remaining 33% of his losses. Now, in this matchup, RoboCop's going to be 3-1 in his last 4. We did see a big win over Christian Leroy Duncan, which is going to be a fight that continues to age very well for this guy. Given that you saw CLD just slime out, Marco Tulio. Marco Tulio, one of the most violent fighters in the middleweight division. And now, RoboCop goes out there against the boy, Killa Gorilla Cannonier, a Phoenix resident or Glendale resident in Arizona, not too far from my neck of the woods. And he makes it a very tough fight for Jared early on, but then he ends up getting slimed out. I love to say slimed out. I know people hate that shit. It's just fun to say. But we saw Jared Killa Gorilla hang in there and then show RoboCop, you got to have 5 rounds of gas tank before you think you're going to take my ass out. And he gets a big KO over RoboCop. But after that, RoboCop responds in kind with a big and brutal KO over Jack Hermanson. He knocked out Jack Hermanson more brutally than I've seen most guys ever be KO'd in my experience watching the UFC. So much so that Jack Hermanson actually ended up dropping down a division and getting KO'd yet again. But perhaps he got hit so hard that he's like, damn, I can't be fucking getting hit by guys like RoboCop again. After that, RoboCop goes out there against Roman Kopylov, who gives him some trouble, but not that much trouble, and really wins a very clear, clean decision in my honest opinion. Now, going up against Bruno Ferreira, this is going to be a tough outing, right? Bruno Ferreira is 33 years old, 5'10", with a 72-inch reach. He is 15-2 as a pro, 6-2 in the UFC. He's got 9 wins by way of KO, a 60% KO rate, 5 wins by way of submission, a 33% submission rate, and 1 win by way of decision, a 7% decision rate, giving Bruno Ferreira a 93% finishing rate overall. In his losses, never went to the scorecards. He has only lost by way of finish, once by way of KO and once by way of submission. 50% in each of those categories, which means this dude is a I live by the sword, die by the sword fighter. He does not get taken to the scorecards when it's him losing. And his only win by way of decision actually came over Marvin Vettori in his last outing. Now, the Hulk is 3-1 in his last 4. And obviously we saw, he did lose to Abus Magomedov in a fight where I think he was probably on track to win, but Abus Magomedov is a crafty guy, finds a way to get, I think it was an armbar over Mr. Bruno Ferreira, but then goes back and responds with a big submission over Armin Petrosian, and then another submission in round 1 over Jackson McVeigh, who was debuting in the UFC at that point. And then a big win over Marvin Vettori by way of decision, where he just, boxed Marvin out for 3 rounds, in my opinion. Close fight as the fight went on, but the Hulk gets it done. And guys, this matchup's a tough one, right? You have 2 guys who clearly have an ability to strike on the feet, have power in their hands, and then also, in addition to that, you have 2 guys who can mix things up in the grappling and on the floor. I think that Bruno Ferreira, actually, in my opinion, is going to be a bit more of a threat there on the floor. He's a very strong, while he's going to be stockier for this division at 5'10", he is very, very strong. He's shown that in his fights, in previous fights. And so I think if this is to hit the floor, I could actually see Bruno Ferreira actually, latching up some type of sub that puts Gregory Rodriguez in harm's way. But Gregory Rodriguez is also a very solid grappler when it comes to things on the ground. And I think where I see this fight headed, I think both these guys know what they're coming into, both these guys being heavy-handed and pretty strong finishers. I see this kind of almost being, in a way, it could be a slugfest, but it could also very likely be a tit-for-tat sort of kickboxing match on the feet where, in my opinion, I think Gregory Rodriguez is going to have the stronger, long-ranged approach, given that he's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's also, 5 inches taller than the Hulk. I just see Gregory Rodriguez being able to pepper a lot better from range, and use those long straights that he has, perhaps even throwing some hooks in there. But just I think he's gonna have a better ranged approach than the Hulk, and the Hulk is gonna be kind of in that Mike Tyson approach where he's trying to kind of juke and jive and close that distance. Now there's a big chance one of these guys does get knocked unconscious because both these dudes have power in their hands. But like I said, I think it's gonna be more of them being weary of each other's power, staying somewhat at range, and having a tit-for-tat kickboxing match, which, in my opinion, is going to go heavily in favor of RoboCop, and so that is why I'm picking him by decision. But I would not doubt a chance of, Bruno Ferreira landing a big overhand and maybe even knocking Gregory Rodriguez out, hurting him maybe, and then getting a sub. There's definitely a chance of that as well, but I think it's more likely to go a decision, and I think that I would favor Gregory Rodriguez in that matchup. All right, guys, fight number 11, we've got Rob Font versus Crimson Chin himself, Raul Rosas Jr., okay? Rob Font, 38 years old, 5'8" with a 71.5-inch reach. He is 22-9 as a pro, 12-8 in the UFC. He has 9 wins by way of knockout, a 41% KO rate, 4 wins by way of submission, an 18% submission rate, and 9 wins by way of decision, the remaining 41% of his wins, giving Rob Font a 59% finishing rate overall. Taking a look at his losses, Rob Font's lost once by way of submission, which is 11% of his losses, and the other 8 of his professional losses have come by way of decision, giving him a decision loss rate of 89%. Last 4 fights for Rob Font, 2-2. Now these have all come by way of a decision, whether it be him losing or winning. Now he did get that split decision win over G Matsumoto, one that I believe is deserved. I think he beat G Matsumoto in that matchup. A big decision win over Kyler Phillips, who's actually the Matrix. He's a very good striker. Very tricky guy to go up against, I would say, in bantamweight. Now, he's a bit smaller for the bantamweight division, if you think about it, so definitely some stuff to look at there. But Rob Font, at 38 years old, has proven that he could still hang in there with the best. Now, his opponent is going to be a nice young whippersnapper. Raul Rosas Jr. is 21 years old, 5'9", with a 67-inch reach. So we're going to see a significant reach advantage for Rob Font, which is not a good sign for Raul Rosas Jr. Rob Font has one of the best jabs, especially in the bantamweight division. Now, Raul Rosas, 11-1 as a pro. He is 5-1 in the UFC. He's got 2 wins by way of knockout, an 18% KO rate. He has 6 wins by way of submission, a 55% submission rate, and 3 wins by way of decision, a 27% decision rate, giving Raul Rosas Jr. a 73% finishing rate overall. His only loss in his professional career came by way of decision, so 100% of his losses overall. That was to Mr. C-Rod, the guy who's the prospect killer in a lot of spots within this division. Now, last 4 fights for Raul Rosas Jr., he has been a perfect 4-0. A big win over Terrence Mitchell by way of KO. The sub over Ricky Turcios, who's also fighting on this card, or I've already talked about. Sorry, guys, I do these in reverse order just because I feel like sometimes when I start with the card, the prelims, I put way too much time, I think, breaking those down versus I should put more time breaking down the main card fights. So, anywho, a big win over Arichi Long and a big win over Vincent Morales. But, guys, one thing that has been a little disheartening for me as a fan of Raul Rosas Jr., I don't like to see a guy as young as he is fighting 1 time a year, which is all he did in 2025. And I think in 2024, also a very lackluster activity rate. I think only got 2 fights in that year. Now, he has big goals, lofty goals and aspirations. He says he wants to still achieve all these things by age 25 and retire by age 25, like being a double champ and stuff. And he is not going to get there by winning 1 fight a year. Like, you're just not. Like, you're 21, he's still super young, but he's going to have to fight a lot more. I would like to see Raul Rosas Jr. get at least 2 fights a year minimum, but if he could do more, it would just add to his legacy and also allow him to get to the upper echelon of this division. Now, guys, the way I see this fight going, I think that you have a crafty veteran in Rob Font who, like I said, has one of the best jabs in this division. But the thing that I cannot look past with Rob Font in this matchup is not only is he an aging fighter in this division, but if you go and look at his previous performances against guys like Davison Figueiredo or Corey Sandhagen, he has completely been neutralized by guys who are able to have offensive wrestling and get him to the ground. And he is a fish out of water when his back touches the floor. And so if Rob Font is unable to stop that offensive wrestling of Raul Rosas Jr., it is going to be a long night for him. And Raul Rosas Jr. is not only a very solid offensive grappler, he's just very strong overall. And I think as he continues to get older, he's going to get even stronger here. And I see the way this fight going, I don't necessarily see Raul Rosas getting a submission in this matchup, but I do see on the feet Rob Font giving Raul Rosas Jr. some problems. But ultimately, what I end up seeing happening is Raul Rosas Jr. finding those takedown entries and winning this by way of, somewhat smudge grappling Rob Font. Maybe he goes for a couple submissions. Maybe he goes for some heavy ground and pound. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel he is not going to finish Rob Font here. I think that he'll probably just get Rob Font to the floor and hold him down and win this fight off of just having a dominant grappling style performance. That is my official pick and decision. It's going to be a decision, and it's going to go in the way of Raul Rosas Jr. All right, guys, we are on to the co-main event of the evening. This is fight number 12 in the middleweight division. It is going to be a very fun fight, in my opinion. We've got Caio Borralho versus Reinier de Ridder. I always like to joke that Caio is like the Brazilian name for Kyle. I don't know why. It reminds me of that name for some reason. Now, Caio is 33 years old. He's 6'1". He is 75-inch reach with a 17-2 professional record, a 7-1 record in the UFC. He has 5 wins by way of knockout, a 29% KO rate. He has 4 wins by way of submission, a 24% submission rate, and then 8 wins by way of decision, a 47% decision rate, giving Mr. Caio a 53% finishing rate overall, which is decent, but not the greatest that we'd like to see, right? Especially when you consider some of the other guys in this division, especially his opponent in this case. Now, the only losses that Caio has had in his professional career have happened by way of decision. So he has 2 losses by way of decision, which is 100% of his losses overall. Last 4 fights, he is 3-1. Big wins over, Abus Magomedov, who has proven to be a bit of a tricky guy in this division particularly, and he was able to go out there and get a unanimous decision victory. Of course, gets a big KO win over Paul Krieg, which, almost expected in this case. And then a big win over Jared Cannonier, where, he stood there and went toe-to-toe with Jared Cannonier, the killer gorilla. He ate the big shots of Jared and actually was able to almost closed that entire fight out by way of finish in the last round. Dropped Jared pretty badly, hurt him quite a bit on the feet. So Caio did a great job in that fight, showing off his ability to stand with a guy who has power and is dangerous. Now, he did recently lose to Nassourdine Imavov in France. Now, this loss, I think, is going to continue to age gracefully for Caio because, as we know, Nassourdine Imavov is expected to be or likely to be the next contender for the belt at middleweight and is on a bit of a win streak here himself. And I think there's also some contention on that fight. There was a couple eye pokes that didn't get called necessarily, and so a lot of fans feel that was leaning heavier in favor of Nassourdine due to the eye pokes. I still think that Caio was losing that fight, but regardless, his opponent in this case is going to be a completely different style. We've got Reinier de Ridder. I like to call him Reindeer de Ridder, but my boy RDR, one of the top guys in the UFC, and also a guy that has built quite a fun fan base after getting big wins over Kevin Holland and Bo Nickel. Reindeer de Ridder is 35 years old. He is 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. He is 21-3 as a pro, 4-1 in the UFC. He has 4 wins by way of knockout, a 19% KO rate. 14 wins by way of submission, 67% submission rate, 3 wins by way of decision, a 14% decision rate, giving Reinier a 86% finishing rate overall, much bigger than that of what Caio Borralho is showing in his stats, right? Now, you could argue, it's because a lot of those fights also were in a different company, not the same level of talent, if you will. But these guys aren't too far off in terms of their UFC experience. You have 8 UFC fights to 5. And then taking a look at Reinier de Ridder's losses, he has 3 losses, but all of those losses have come by way of knockout in his professional career. And his last 4 fights, also 3-1. These guys are sharing a very similar approach here of, being on decent win streaks and losing one in the top of the division. Now, the loss that Reinier de Ridder had this past October is one that I think is going to always be a bit of a stain on his legacy. Now, I think that it's very clear as to why he likely lost this. As we all know, very active year for this man. He had a fight against Kevin Holland in January of 2025. He gets back out there in May of 2025 and he beats Bo Nickel, gives Bo Nickel his first pro loss and first loss by way of knockout. Then he gets back in there in July, has a 5-round war with Robert Whitaker where he gets dropped badly at one point, but he stays the course. He lands some big body knees, hurts Robert Whitaker a couple times with those, and gets a decision by way of split decision in his favor. But then he gets back out there again for another matchup against Brendan Allen. And that is just tough to do, guys. Like that was only a couple months off where he's basically in 2025 kind of did the Merab thing, right? Where he just did too much. Now Merab, a bit different because Merab went for championship level bouts, right? Versus just being 3-round bouts. But when you really think about it, I think that plays a big role in why we saw Reinier de Ridder kind of crumble at the hands of Brendan Allen. I'm not trying to take anything away from Brendan Allen. I think Brendan Allen is clearly a very good fighter and a guy who has kind of grown up in the UFC himself. So he's just built a lot of experience. But I just think that matchup was a tough one, right? And you could write it off and just say, you know what, it was because he fought too much, was too active. He needed some time off to kind of get back, recalibrate, and come back strong. And you know what? This fight, guys, what's really tough about this one and why I think it's such a fun fight, it's very hard to see or predict. Clearly both these guys are very good when it comes to the submission game. You could argue Reinier de Ridder because of his, not only his wins by way of submission, but just his overall career and what he's been able to do in the UFC. He seems to be a guy who is able to utilize his judo background, his jiu-jitsu background to really overwhelm his opponents and get big victories by way of those submissions. But then he also has that battering ram of a knee up the middle. But Caio Borralho, guys, is a guy who, has that Brazilian black belt in jiu-jitsu. He is one of the founders and I think cornerstone guys for the Fighting Nerds. A very smart guy, very analytical guy. Used to be, I think, a chemistry teacher before he became a fighter, or a professional fighter, that is. And what makes this one very interesting is we just don't know, like, will Reinier de Ridder actually be able to just go out there and overpower Caio Borralho with his grappling heavy approach? Will he be able to use those judo throws to get control of Caio Borralho and potentially win rounds that way? Because I don't see Reinier de Ridder getting a submission over Caio, given that Caio has never even lost by way of finish, but he's also a very talented jiu-jitsu guy himself. And if you really want to play MMA math, Caio Borralho actually went out there and he beat Brendan Allen in a grappling competition. Now, I know it was short notice for Brendan Allen, so it's not necessarily like the best win, but that is just something to keep in the back of your mind. But also, I think a big thing for Reinier de Ridder, guys, is he's going to be wanting to prove himself in this one after having a loss the way he just lost to Brendan Allen, where he was on the stool and they called it, right? That is a bad look. So he's going to be wanting to go out there and I think prove himself. The one thing that I think makes this lean in Caio Borralho's way is both these guys, like I said, strong grapplers, but when you talk about straight stand-up and ability on the feet, Caio Borralho has shown a very strong ability to switch stances and utilize different approaches on the feet. For instance, he's normally an orthodox fighter, but against Jared Cannonier, he fought in southpaw because he knew that could give Jared Cannonier a lot more issues on the feet. And that is just something that I feel like if we're really comparing these two guys and their styles, I think that Caio Borralho is going to be bringing the higher level ability to strike on the feet, and he's going to be the more dangerous striker on the feet, and that is really what makes the difference in this fight. I think Reinier de Ridder is likely to be a very strong first round type of fighter here, but the way I see this one going, guys, I see Caio Borralho just being able to weather the storm that Reinier kind of brings into the first round, and I think Caio Borralho is going to actually be able to overwhelm Reinier de Ridder as this fight goes on with his ability to strike, but then also counter any of those grappling, wrestling opportunities that Rainier brings his way. So I actually see Caio Borralho winning this one by way of decision. I think he'll probably clinch 2 of 3 rounds, just having the cleaner and better striking. So that is why I'm going Caio Borralho, but I can see why people are also leaning heavily towards Rainier de Ridder. Perhaps they think that the grappling from him is going to be too much for Caio, but I just don't see it happening. I see Caio winning by way of decision. All right, guys, we have officially made it to the main event of the evening. We've got Max, the Blessed Express Holloway versus Charles Dubronx Oliveira. This fight is going to be an absolute masterclass, I believe. I definitely think it can go lots of different ways. If you didn't check out my entire breakdown for these guys, I did a 40-minute breakdown going through every single thing you can think of between both Max and Charles. So definitely check that out. What I'm going to do here is keep it short and simple. We're going to go through the stats, and I'll just give you my POV overall. So Max Holloway, 34 years old. He is 5'11" with a 69-inch reach. He likes to always joke he's got those T-Rex arms, right? He is 27-8 as a pro, 23-8 in the UFC. So that just shows you Max has only had 4 fights outside of the UFC when he was a nice young spry chicken. Max has 12 wins by way of knockout. That is a 44% KO rate. 13 wins, 2 wins by way of submission, a 7% submission rate, then 13 wins by way of decision, a 48% decision rate, giving Mr. Max Holloway a 52% finishing rate overall. When we look at Max's losses, he has only lost 1 time by way of knockout. That was to Ilia Topuria. That is 13% of his professional losses. He has 1 loss by way of submission, another 13% of his professional losses. And then finally, 6 losses by way of decision. 3 of those are Alexander Volkanovski. That's 75% of his total losses overall. Now, listen, I know if you add 13 and 13, you get 26, plus 75 is 101. Just know that the losses, I bet you they're decimals. It just rounds up. So apologies for any of you math nerds out there. But looking at the last 4 fights for Max Holloway, we have a 3-1 record with not only 2 brutal KO finishes over some really good guys like Korean Zombie, which is Chan Sung Jung, and then Justin Gaethje, but then a unanimous decision victory over Dustin Poirier, where each guy had a knockdown scored against the other, but Max Holloway had 198 significant strikes, whereas Dustin only had 109, showing you that Max pretty much dominated in that matchup, especially in the striking. Max's only loss by way of knockout in his entire career came by the hands of the brutal boxing that Ilia Topuria brings to the octagon. That one happened back in 2024, October. So Max, since then, though, has shown off a huge win over Dustin Poirier in the lightweight division. Now he takes on another legend in Charles Dubronx. Charles Oliveira is 36 years old. He's 5'10" with a 74-inch reach. He's going to have about a 5-inch reach advantage here against Max Holloway. He is 36-11. 24-11 in the UFC. Charles has 10 wins by way of knockout, a 28% KO rate. Charles then has 22 wins by way of submission, a 61% submission rate. He not only has a really high submission rate, he has the most submission victories in UFC history and counting. Finally, Charles only has 4 wins by way of decision, giving him an 11% decision rate, which means he has an 89% finishing rate overall, which is absolutely outstanding to see, guys. That is so amazing to see Charles Oliveira. 89% finishing rate, considering that he also was a previous champ and a multi-defending time champ. So a guy who, even at the highest level of the game, has always gotten finishes. Taking a look at Charles' losses, he's lost in every category that you can imagine, right? So he's got 5 losses by way of knockout. That is 45% of his losses overall. Now, the last loss he had by way of KO was actually like a true KO where he was brutally knocked out by Ilia Topuria. Some of those other losses happened due to injuries and things of that nature. But prior to that, or I guess in addition to that, he has 4 losses by submission, which is 36% of his losses. And then he has 2 losses by way of decision. It's 18% of his losses overall, which means Charles doesn't often win or lose by way of decision. He is a live by the sword, die by the sword sort of fighter. In Charles' last 4 fights, he is 2-2. Obviously, the Arman Sarukian loss, we've talked about that a lot on this channel. There's a lot of fans who think that that could have gone Charles' way, which I tend to agree with as well. I think Arman should have gotten the nod at the end of the day, but I can also see the debate or argument for why Charles should have been the one in the winning column there. Of course, the Ilia Topuria loss in round 1, nothing to nothing to argue about on that one. That was a very definitive loss for Charles, but a big win over Michael Chandler where they had a rematch. Prior to that, we all know Chucky Oliveira dusted Michael Chandler, knocked him out back in 2021 to become the lightweight champion after Khabib vacated. And then Charles, in his last outing, only a few months after being brutally KO'd, he goes out in his hometown right before his birthday, and he smokes Mateusz Gamrot like he is some fucking ribs on a Sunday afternoon. And it was fantastic to watch. I actually picked Mateusz Gamrot like an idiot that I am, thinking that I was just very worried about the brutal knockout Charles endured only months prior. And even though Mateusz Gamrot's, been talked about as having pillow fists, we have seen him hurt guys on the feet before. And so I was like, this is not a good sign with Charles, having that brutal KO. But what did Charles do? He proved me wrong 1,000 times over with that one. Now, could Charles prove me wrong again? It is very possible here, guys. The way I see this fight going, and I talked about this in my breakdown, is it's really a battle of the styles. It's a battle of, can Charles implement his strong grappling game, his strong clinching game when things get hairy or things get close in distance, right? The main thing that Max is going to do that he does in every fight is he's going to bring a very high volume, a very high output and pace. He's not going to slow down as the rounds go on and get later into the fight. So if Charles is unable, in my opinion, to latch up any sort of damage on the feet or latch up some sort of a takedown or clinch and actually get Max into some hairy positions early on, I just see that the longer this fight goes, the less it plays into the game in hands of Charles Oliveira, and the more Max will kind of take the fight into his world. So I think Charles has to make sure when the striking happens, he has to be precise. He has to land those big straight punches on Max. He needs to try to hurt Max on the feet and get Max thinking more about the punches, which will open up some more of the grappling scenarios. And Max, I think, just has to do what Max does best, right? Stay elusive on the feet, have that lateral footwork nonstop in this fight, and blitz in and out, land combinations, layer the combinations to the body and the head, get Charles really respecting the power and speed that he has, and have Charles kind of second guess himself there. Charles is not a guy who's going to go on the back foot. He's going to be front foot the entire time going forward. So I think Max just has to make him pay in those situations. The way that I see the fight going is exactly that. I think Max is going to be able to weather the storm from Charles, especially from the grappling perspective. Max has a very high takedown defense percentage of 83%. I think Max will be able to stop the takedowns. Even if he does get taken down, I think Max has proven to have strong ability to get back to his feet. And I just think that Max is going to win in the majority of this fight by using his very fast punching combinations, his fast and also sneaky power that I think a lot of people, people are saying now he's so powerful at lightweight. And then you have a lot of people who are discrediting his power at lightweight. I think that Max has proven that he can hurt guys on the feet. He hurt Dustin. He hurt Justin Gaethje and knocked him out. So I think Max has come into his own. And I think that his striking is just going to be too much for Charles. I think Charles has a good chance of winning the fight, though. It's not a blowout, in my opinion. But I think I see things going Max's way more, though, than I see it going Charles' way. So that is my official pick, guys. I'm going Max Holloway by way of unanimous decision. And that is my pick for the main event of UFC 326. And there you guys have it. Those are my official picks and predictions for UFC 326. Like I said before, if you guys could do me a big favor, drop a like, drop a comment below what your thoughts are on the card overall. Would love to hear from you guys. Let me know which fight you are most excited for outside of the main event, because I think we're all super excited for that one. And please subscribe to Fight Feed if you haven't already, so that way you can watch and stay on top of all the new content that I'll be posting. I truly appreciate all of you who have tuned in, subscribed, and I will see you guys all in the next one.